I've seen a lot of talk about how it's been 80 plus days since Destiny 2's launch, and we've only had a few minor bug fixes, no patches, no announcement of endgame changes, no announcement of ranked PvP, all as if this was somehow a new thing in the world of Destiny. I hate to burst your bubble if you are one of those that have these thoughts, but Bungie has always handled Destiny this way, since way back in 2014. However, I knew I would need some sort of finite proof of this fact, so I personally went back and looked through all of the patches and hotfixes that have occurred over the years in an attempt to prove this point for the sole reason that I hope it will spread around at least my community and at the very least instill some patience. To do so, let's go back to Destiny 1's launch on September 9th, 2014 and chronologically discuss each hotfix and patch and briefly gloss over the major fixes and changes or endgame additions they implemented. We will start with 5 days after launch on September 14th, 2014. This is when we got the first hotfix. This hotfix had one meaningful change. In Bungie's own words, public events should occur twice as frequently, and that's it. That's all that hotfix entailed. 8 days later, on the 22nd of September 2014, we received patch 1.0.1.4. This patch made heroic missions easier, but in actuality nerfed a glimmer farm at the time. It fixed a Vault of Glass bug that caused wipes and permanent black screens if the relic was dropped early even if the encounter was finished, and fixed an issue with Hunter gear, which at the time required materials found from dismantling gear from other classes instead of the Hunter materials that were relevant at the time. Shortly after, just 3 days later on the 25th, we received Hotfix 5, which included the infamous nerf to the loot caves. This hotfix also nerfed the Queen's Wrath gear to where it no longer dismantled into Ascendant materials, as this was quote unintended. This nerf in hindsight waste of time and resources, as we never saw this event ever again. Jumping forward to October 1st, 2014, we got another patch. This was the patch that made rare and legendary engrams decrypt into appropriate rarity gear, because prior to this patch, legendary and rare engrams had a pretty frequent chance to become green gear. This patch also added those same rare and legendary engrams to the loot table of Tiger Strikes, something that wasn't obtainable through mid-tier strikes prior. Less than a week later, we got yet another hotfix that when looking for in-game changes, it did nothing. It did a few things that were back-end, but for in-game changes, nothing occurred. A week later, on October 14th, 2014, we received hotfix 1.0.2.2. This was the infamous nerf to the Vex Mythoclast, the nerf to the 2 Vault of Glass Templar cheeses, the removal of yet another loot cave, and some minor class perk changes. We were then left in silence for 2 weeks before receiving patch 1.0.2.3, which fixed 2 things: the Atheon cheese, and it fixed the fact that Atheon wouldn't choose who to teleport randomly. With this patch, he would now choose randomly instead of teleporting those that were furthest back in the arena. Then again, we were left in the dark for nearly 3 weeks until 20 days later, on November 17, 2014, we received patch 1.0.3, which was the first major patch to occur. This added a lot of stuff, but when it came to major game-changing additions, this patch included just a few things. It increased the bounty slots to 10 from 5. It was the first implementation of the Iron Banner in Destiny's history since the beta. To give some perspective on this, at the time the game had been out for around 70 days, and so far at the time we had one event, Queen's Wrath. And for 3 months, since July 19th, 2014, during the beta, we had been waiting for the return of Iron Banner, and we finally got it with this patch. This patch also included the opt-in voice comms that we, as a community, stated we so desperately needed, and then proceeded to never use. It included numerous class and weapon perk changes, as well as multiple Crucible out-of-map exploit fixes. Now, it may seem like that was a long-winded point to drive home, but it was all to prove a singular point. That point being, I think people have forgotten how Bungie operates, because the next patch on the list of patches and hotfix that I would have included in that long list was the one that leads into the Dark Blow, the first expansion for Destiny 1, and was the patch that included the first major sandbox update. I see so many people claiming Destiny 2 is dead and say we didn't have these issues in Destiny 1, but we absolutely did. We had legendary engrams becoming greens, and legendary engrams at the time were rare, and I mean really, really, really rare, and they had a chance to become greens. The ultimate point I'm trying to make here is Bungie doesn't communicate, they never have, and they never will. Bungie rarely patches, and this has been an issue since day one back in 2014. They aren't going to change that. People tend to forget that nostalgia, by definition, tends to lead you to only remember the good times that occurred. People tend to forget how awfully overpowered the Vex Mythoclast was, and what it was like not having it in the Crucible. They tend to forget being Forever 29. People forget how poor the loot system was, and that it being so bad that we literally had to resort to shooting at a cave to get a legendary that would probably end up turning into a green. People forget that at one point public events were not only a rare occurrence, but their rewards were absolutely terrible. They forget that strange coins were basically soft capped at 27 per week. We forget these things because that's how nostalgia works. We don't look back at these times and think about how they were major flaws. We look back and almost certainly remember these things, but you remember them for the time spent with friends, the jokes made about green legendaries, and that feeling when a group of 10 people all stopped shooting at a cave and ran into it to check to see if there was an elusive legendary, and the excitement you felt when there was one there. You forget how bad this was because people are wired to remember the good times. These issues were fixed, and I completely agree that having an equal amount but a vastly different set of issues again in Destiny 2 shouldn't be happening. But when you look back at Destiny for what it was at launch and then compare it to what it was like at Age of Triumph, begin to realize that Bungie is fully capable of fixing it. It just takes them a long time to do so. Bungie has always been this way, and I can promise you they will never change. All this, everything I said, can lead to one of two outcomes. You can either say it's dead on arrival, you can say Destiny 2 sucks and give up on it, or you can play the expansions that majority of you have already paid for and get your $80 worth by this time next year. I know this is a terrible way to look at it, and I completely agree with saying that they should have had it right already, but they don't. And like I said, majority of you have already paid for it. There's an idea or concept known as the sunk cost fallacy. It's a misconception that you make rational decisions based on the future value of objects, investments, or experiences, when in reality, your decisions are tainted by emotional investments you accumulate, and the more you invest into something, the harder it becomes to abandon it. This is exactly what occurs for the majority of the Destiny community. So many players are so emotionally tied to Destiny that they can't just step away and come back later. But the longer you play, trying to get, quote, your money's worth, the more you will begin to loathe what you are doing, the more you will fight to find that value, and the more you will begin to notice the faults that you had previously turned a blind eye towards. At the end of the day, you are asking Bungie to do something that they have never done and never will do. And at the same time, you're slowly working towards hating the game in the process. Step away from Destiny and come back when the expansion comes out in 9 days. Watch the reveal on Wednesday and cautiously but optimistically hope they announce what we all want to hear. Then, when the Curse of Osiris comes out, enjoy the new things and then step away again if you need to. There's no reason to force yourself into hatred for something you know and I know and everyone knows we all enjoy. If you truly have faith in Bungie and truly feel that they will make a fantastic game, then wait for that game to come and don't make yourself hate it in the meantime.